The night she expected freedom, his voice branded her destiny. Ilara had counted down to this night the way a prisoner counts the cracks in her cell. Each day had been another tally scratched into her soul. Tonight, she would finally slip past the walls that caged her, past the cruel eyes that reminded her every day she was nothing but an omega. The lowest. The weakest. The one who served while others ruled. She crouched at the edge of the woods, heart hammering, breath shallow as she studied the moonlit path ahead. Beyond this line of trees lay the forbidden meadow where the higher wolves gathered in secret. She wasn't supposed to know it existed. Omegas weren't meant to overhear whispers about midnight feasts and whispered deals sealed under the moon. But Ilara had always been a shadow, small, unnoticed, invisible enough to listen when no one thought she was near. She adjusted the thin hood over her head, pulling it low. If she stayed quiet, if she moved carefully, she could cross the meadow without being seen. Then the river would be just a mile away. Beyond that? Freedom. Her chest tightened at the word. Freedom. It was a taste she had never known. All she had were scraps of other people's stories, vague tales of omegas who had vanished, found their way to the free lands, and carved lives for themselves. No master. No commands. No cruelty disguised as duty. Just a chance to live on their own terms. She craved it more than air. Ilara swallowed hard, her throat dry as she slipped into the trees. The cool night air brushed her skin, carrying the faintest scent of roasted meat and fire. Laughter floated across the meadow, sharp and careless. She crept closer, hard in her throat. When she reached the edge of the clearing, her breath caught. Dozens of wolves filled the meadow, most in human form, their fine clothes catching silver in the moonlight. They lounged around fires, goblets in hand, their laughter rolling in waves. Betas leaned lazily against tree trunks while alphas traded boasts about hunts and battles. Their confidence was intoxicating, loud enough to shake the night. Ilara pressed herself into the shadows, her nails digging into her palms. She had never been this close to them before. Never seen them without the mask of authority, never heard their voices stripped of commands. They were wolves, yes, but they were still just people. And yet, to Ilara, they were gods. She shifted, inching along the tree line, her heart thundering with each step. She didn't belong here. If any of them caught her, an omega trespassing in a gathering like this, punishment would be swift. Omegas didn't get second chances. Her wolf stirred nervously under her skin, urging her to hurry. Almost there. Just a little farther. Then the air changed. The laughter died mid-breath. Conversations stuttered into silence. Even the crackle of fire seemed to hush, as though the flames themselves bowed to a greater presence. Ilara froze. Her stomach dropped. Something heavy pressed against her chest, invisible but suffocating, like a hand closing around her throat. She didn't need anyone to tell her what it meant. The Alpha King had arrived. Her lungs forgot how to work. She had never seen him, not truly. Stories of him had traveled through every whisper in the pack, ruthless, untouchable, his dominance stretching across territories like a storm no one could escape. He was the alpha of alphas. His voice could command an army. His wrath could raise a pack to ashes. And now, he was here. Wolves dropped to their knees in perfect unison, their heads bowed. Ilara's body refused to move. Terror rooted her in place, but something deeper, something stranger, held her still. Her wolf trembled, ears flat, tail tucked tight, but it wasn't just fear. It was anticipation. Boots crushed leaves. The sound was deliberate, slow, and heavy, each step echoing into her bones. Who dares stand while others kneel? The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It rolled through the clearing, deep and rough, thick with authority that left no room for refusal. Ilara's had slipped back in the faint breeze. Gasps scattered like sparks through the meadow. An omega. Standing. Her breath hitched as his gaze found her. Even across the distance, she felt the impact. Golden eyes burned through the dark, locking onto her with such force it nearly drove her to her knees. But she couldn't look away. She couldn't move. Her body belonged to something larger now, some current pulling her into the center of a storm she didn't understand. The Alpha King stepped into the moonlight. He was taller than she imagined, broad shoulders cutting a silhouette that swallowed the night behind him. His presence wasn't just seen, it was felt, in the marrow of bones, in the thrum of blood. His jaw was set, his expression unreadable, but his eyes as God's, his eyes seared into her soul. Then it happened. One heartbeat. One inhale. The bond snapped. It tore through her like lightning, white-hot and merciless, a tether lashing itself around her soul. Elara gasped, clutching her chest as fire spread through her veins. Her knees buckled, but she didn't fall. She couldn't. Her body shook, her wolf howled, and something deep inside her whispered a truth she wanted to deny. Mate. Her vision blurred. No. No, this couldn't be happening. Not now. Not to her. She hadn't asked for this. She didn't want this. She wanted freedom, not chains. The Alpha King stiffened, his lips parting as if the air itself betrayed him. His eyes flared, golden fire blazing brighter. He felt it too. The bond. The claim. And it infuriated him. He stalked toward her, each step deliberate, measured, predatory. Wolves scrambled out of his path, their heads still bowed, but their eyes flicking up in disbelief. An Omega. The Alpha King's mate was an Omega? Elara's chest constricted as he stopped in front of her. The air between them crackled, thick with heat, thick with something dangerous and intoxicating. He reached out, his hand brushing against her neck where the bond pulsed furiously beneath her skin. Her body shuddered. She flinched back, breath ragged. No, she rasped, voice breaking. This isn't right. I don't want this. His thumb dragged across her jaw, rough, claiming. His gaze never wavered. It is done. The words slammed into her like shackles. The bond tightened, burning her veins, sealing itself deeper. She cried out, stumbling under the force of it. Around them, whispers hissed like knives. An Omega. The king's mate, impossible. Shame and fury twisted inside her, a storm of emotions she couldn't untangle. She wanted to scream. She wanted to claw her way free. She wanted to demand the freedom she had been chasing with every breath of her life. But his hand held her steady, unyielding. His touch wasn't gentle, it was possession. You don't know me, she forced out, her voice shaking with anger. You can't just take me like this. I don't belong to you. For the first time, his expression shifted. A flicker of something unreadable, pain, anger, hunger, she couldn't tell, crossed his face. But his voice was steady, quiet enough that only she could hear. You belong to me now, he said, the words carved from stone. His eyes burned into hers, branding her with the weight of a vow. Whether you wanted this or not. The bond pulsed hot and merciless in answer, sealing her fate. And in that moment, Elara understood. Her freedom was gone. Not stolen, not lost. Claimed. Love tastes sweet until you find poison in the cup. The palace was nothing like Elara imagined. It was a fortress of glass and steel, rising high above the sprawling territory like a monument to power. Its walls gleamed in the morning sun, every corridor polished to perfection, every detail a reminder that this was not a place for mistakes. And she was a mistake that had been dragged in and set at the center of it. Elara followed the Alpha King, Kale. She had learned his name, through endless halls on her first day inside, her stomach twisting tighter with every step. Courtiers lingered along the walls, their eyes sharp, their whispers venomous. Everywhere she turned, she saw disdain, disgust, disbelief. An Omega. In the palace. Walking beside the king. Her wolf curled low inside her, uneasy, snarling at the glares that sliced into her from every angle. But Alara kept her head high, refusing to let them see her break. She had survived cruelty before. She could survive it again. Still, when the doors to her chambers swung open, she felt relief so sharp it nearly knocked her to her knees. The room was vast, larger than any she'd ever stepped into, with tall windows spilling light across velvet drapes and golden floors. A bed so soft it looked like clouds sat at the center. It should have been a dream. Instead, it was a gilded cage. She ran her fingers over the carved wood of the bed frame, her throat tight. Freedom had been so close. Now she stood in a palace where every luxury was another reminder that she was trapped. Claimed. Behind her, Kale lingered in the doorway, his presence filling the room without effort. He didn't speak at first. His eyes roamed the space as though checking for flaws, but Alara knew his silence wasn't about the room, it was about her. "You'll stay here," he said finally, his voice low, final. "No one enters without my command." Her fists clenched at her sides. "You mean I can't leave?" He studied her for a long moment, his golden eyes unreadable. "Not yet. Not yet." Two words that sounded too much like never. He left without another word, and the door shut behind him with a thud that echoed through her chest. The days that followed were an exercise in endurance. Everywhere she went within the palace walls, eyes followed. Servants sneered behind polite smiles. Other Omegas, those bound to serve in silence, looked at her with open hostility. To them, she wasn't a sister. She was an insult. At meals, her chair sat at the king's side, an empty gulf stretching between her and the rest of the court. Conversations hushed when she entered. Even laughter seemed to curdle into mockery. Alara forced herself to meet their stares with calm she didn't feel. But at night, when the door to her chambers closed, the loneliness pressed so hard she could barely breathe. And yet, there were moments. Moments when Kale's gaze softened, when his hand brushed against hers not out of command but out of something that felt dangerously close to tenderness. Nights when she caught him watching her, not with disdain but with hunger. Stolen glances, lingering touches, the bond tugging them closer no matter how hard she tried to resist. Her heart, traitorous as it was, began to falter. She told herself she hated him. That the bond was a chain. That the spark in his eyes was just instinct, not love. But when his lips brushed hers one night in the quiet of her chambers, heat coiled through her so fiercely it left her trembling. His kiss was rough, unpracticed, desperate in a way that didn't match the king who commanded armies. And for a fleeting moment, Alara let herself believe. Maybe, just maybe, this was more than chains. Then she found the letter. It was late. She had been pacing her chambers, restless, searching for something to still the storm in her chest. Her fingers drifted along the desk near the window when she spotted it, folded parchment tucked into the corner, the king's seal broken. Her name wasn't on it. She should have left it there. But her gut twisted, and her hands shook as she unfolded the page. The words hit like a blade. The Omega serves the purpose well. Her bond will keep her loyal. None will question your rule once she is bound. What she believes does not matter, only that she stays. Ilara's blood turned to ice. Her knees weakened as the truth slammed into her. This wasn't fate. This wasn't love. It was strategy. Kale hadn't claimed her because destiny wove them together. He had claimed her because it was convenient. Because an Omega mate was an asset to be controlled, a loyalty weapon to silence doubt. Her heart twisted so violently she pressed a hand to her chest, as though she could hold the pieces together. Her wolf whined inside her, wounded, betrayed. She staggered back, the letter trembling in her grip. Every stolen glance, every brush of his hand, every kiss, it had all been a lie. Tears blurred her vision, but rage burned hotter. She would not be weak. Not again. Not here. The door creaked open. Kale stepped inside, his eyes immediately finding hers. His brow furrowed at the sight of the parchment in her hands. "Ilara. Don't." Her voice cracked like a whip, raw and sharp. She held up the letter, her hand shaking. "What is this?" Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Cale's jaw tightened. He didn't look away. He didn't deny it. Her heart begged for him to say something, anything, that could unravel the knife twisting in her chest. To tell her it was a mistake, a forgery, that fate had chosen her and not his ambition. But he didn't. Instead, his voice was cold, his words cutting clean through the remnants of her hope. "I never needed your heart," he said. His eyes, once golden fire, were hard steel now. "Just your loyalty." The bond pulsed between them, cruel and unrelenting, and Ilara's breath shattered in her lungs. Love had tasted sweet. But the poison had finally surfaced. And it was him. Some betrayals bleed more than blades. Ilara couldn't look at him the same way after the letter. Every glance across the palace corridors cut her deeper. Every flicker of heat in his golden eyes felt like ash pressed into an open wound. She had kissed him, let herself believe, and all the while, he had been playing strategy with her heart. She didn't weep. Not where anyone could see. But when night fell and silence smothered the palace, she curled into herself on the cold marble floor of her chambers, fists clenched so tightly her nails carved crescent moons into her palms. Her wolf whimpered inside her, restless, wounded, howling against the tether that bound them. The bond was merciless. No matter how she tried to ignore it, it pulled. It hummed at the edge of her thoughts, whispering that he was near, that he was restless too, that his emotions bled faintly into her own. She hated it. She hated him. And most of all, she hated herself for still feeling the heat of his touch when she closed her eyes. The letter replayed in her mind like a knife twisting deeper each time. Her bond will keep her loyal. What she believes does not matter. Her loyalty had been stolen, shackled to a man who never wanted her heart. If she could sever it, if she could break free of the bond, then she could reclaim herself. Even if it killed her. The palace library was a labyrinth of shadow and secrets, tucked into the far wing where dust collected thicker than courtiers' whispers. Few dared to linger there, fewer still explored the oldest shelves where parchment yellowed and ink faded into whispers of forgotten laws. That's where Ilara went. Cloaked in silence, she traced her fingers along spines until she found what she was searching for, texts on the old ways. Forbidden rituals. Records from a time when wolves challenged bonds themselves. Her pulse raced as she carried the book to a corner table, shielding it from view. By the dim light of a single candle, she read of ancient ceremonies designed to sever the tether between mates. The words spoke of fire and blood, of how the soul itself was torn in two. The warning was clear, few survived. None were the same. Her hand trembled as she turned the page, but her resolve only hardened. Better a scarred soul than a stolen one. Days bled into nights as she prepared in secret. She hid her desperation behind a mask of calm, answering the court's venom with silence, meeting Kale's unreadable gaze with cold defiance. Yet in the shadows, she found unlikely allies. One was Marin, a beta courtier with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, who had once sneered at Ilara but now lingered with curiosity. "You think being bound to him makes you safe?" Marin whispered one night in the corridor, her lips curling. "It makes you vulnerable. More vulnerable than the rest of us." Another was Naira, an older Omega servant who had lived in the palace long before Ilara's arrival. Her eyes were tired, her voice hushed, but she pressed a vial of herbs into Ilara's hand with trembling fingers. "This will dull the pain, if you're brave enough to do what I think you're planning." The alliances were fragile, built on thin threads of mutual need and quiet rebellion. But they gave her strength. She wasn't as alone as she thought. She felt it in the tether, his frustration, his unease, his sleepless nights pacing the halls. He spoke less, watched her more. His silence carried a weight she couldn't decipher. Once, late at night, she woke to find him in her chambers, standing at the window, the moon painting his shoulders in pale silver. "You're not eating," he said quietly, not looking at her. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "Maybe I'm not hungry." His jaw tightened. "The bond weakens you. If you keep starving yourself." She cut him off, her voice sharp. "Don't pretend you care." That made him turn. His golden eyes burned, not with anger but with something raw, something that made her chest ache in spite of herself. "You think I don't?" he asked, his voice low, almost broken. Elara swallowed hard, forcing steel into her spine. "Care isn't using me for loyalty. Care isn't strategy dressed as fate." Silence stretched between them, heavy, suffocating. Then he left without another word. She didn't see him again for 3 days. Thunder rolled across the sky as Elara slipped from her chambers, her hood drawn low, her steps silent on the cold stone floors. She carried the book tucked beneath her arm, the vial of herbs hidden in her pocket. Her path led her to the underground sanctum, a chamber carved from rock beneath the palace, where old symbols still scarred the walls. Few dared to go there anymore. It reeked of the past, of rituals no one spoke of. Her candle flickered as she traced the markings, her voice steady as she whispered the words she had memorized. The herbs burned in a bowl before her, their smoke filling the air with bitter scent. Her wolf paced inside her, restless, afraid. "You'll die," it warned. "The bond will rip you apart. Better to die free than live bound," she whispered back. She cut her palm, letting blood drip onto the stone circle, her voice rising as she spoke the forbidden chant. The tether inside her flared, burning hot, searing through every nerve like molten fire. She cried out, her body trembling, sweat pouring down her skin. The bond resisted. It pulled tighter, fighting back, lashing through her like a whip. Images flickered in her mind, Kale's face, his eyes wide with anger, his voice echoing across the tether. Her body convulsed. The ritual dragged harder, ripping at the threads of her soul. She screamed, clutching her chest as the bond twisted, threatening to tear her apart. Then the doors slammed open. Kale stormed into the chamber, his golden eyes blazing with fury and fear. "What are you doing?" She gasped, her knees buckling, blood dripping from her hand. "Freeing myself." He crossed the circle, grabbing her shoulders, shaking her. "You'll kill yourself." Her vision blurred, the world tilting. "Then maybe I'll finally be free." The tether snapped taut inside her, agony ripping through her veins. She collapsed against him, her body racked with pain, her consciousness slipping. The last thing she heard before darkness swallowed her was his voice, raw and broken, shouting her name. "Elara." Forgiveness is a battlefield, and the heart is never neutral. The healer's chambers smelled of crushed herbs and old fire. The Omega stirred, her body heavy, her breath shallow but steady. Scars burned across her skin, not just from the ritual that nearly tore her soul apart, but from the choice she had made, to try and cut the Alpha King out of her life forever. She wasn't supposed to wake. The ritual should have killed her. That's what everyone whispered. Yet here she was, clinging stubbornly to life like a flame refusing to die in the wind. But the bond between them had changed. It still hummed beneath her veins, but faintly, fractured, like a song playing through broken glass. And in the shadows, the Alpha King watched her. His once commanding presence was ragged now, haunted. He hadn't slept in nights. He hadn't eaten properly. For the first time in years, the king who ruled with an iron hand looked human. The palace itself mirrored their state. Murmurs of betrayal spread through the court like wildfire. Allies he had trusted for years began to waver. Advisors met in hushed corners. Guards eyed him with quiet suspicion. And at the heart of it all lay her, his claimed mate who wanted nothing to do with him. The healer warned him daily, "Do not push her. If she sees you, she might break what little will she has to live." But how could he stay away when every pull of the bond, every beat of his chest, demanded he be near her? He stood in the hallway outside her chamber, fists clenched, jaw locked. Behind the door, she was breathing, healing, fighting. But not for him. Never for him. When her eyes finally opened, she felt no triumph. Only exhaustion, as though she had crawled out of her own grave. Her first words were not a plea for water or comfort. They were bitter. "Why didn't you let me die?" Her voice was cracked, but her spirit wasn't. The Alpha King froze. He had waited weeks for her to wake, imagined the moment 1,000 times, yet the reality gutted him. "You think I could watch my mate fade into the dirt?" he rasped. "You think I'd let you leave me like that?" "You already did," she whispered, turning her head away. "You left me the moment you chose strategy over truth. My death would have just made it final." Her words sliced cleaner than any blade. He had faced enemies in war, traitors in council, but nothing wounded him like her quiet refusal. Days passed. The palace spun on, unrest deepening, but within the healer's rooms, a different war raged. Every time he came, she turned her face to the wall. Every time he tried to speak, she cut him down with silence sharper than steel. Yet the bond betrayed them both. At night, when the moonlight touched her scars, his wolf howled with need for her. And hers, no matter how much she tried to cage it, still ached when he was near. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't love. It was something rawer, uglier, a reminder of everything they couldn't escape. The court whispered about it. The Omega who defied the king. The king who unraveled for his mate. And like blood in the water, it drew predators closer. One evening, the Omega tried to stand. The healer begged her not to, but she ignored him, pressing her trembling palms against the wall, forcing her body upright. She stumbled, caught herself, and whispered, "I won't be caged." The Alpha King appeared in the doorway, eyes blazing. "You'll tear yourself apart." She glared at him. "Better that than staying here and letting you chain me with pity." His wolf snapped inside him, a violent surge that begged to lock her down, protect her, claim her. But he fought it back, jaw tight. "You think this is pity?" His voice was low, dangerous. "This is me breaking for you." Her chest rose and fell in ragged defiance. "I don't need your breaking. I needed your honesty." The silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. He wanted to say the words he had buried, "I'm sorry. I was a coward. I should have told you the truth." But pride coiled in his throat and choked them out. Instead, he let her go. Watched her limp back to the bed, shaking, stubborn, and fierce. And for the first time, he wondered if forgiveness was something he might never deserve. It happened on the night the court gathered to mark the harvest moon. The Alpha King's enemies had grown bold, and though he suspected treachery, duty demanded his presence. She had insisted on attending too. Not for him, but for herself. "I won't hide," she told the healer. "If the court wants to sneer at me, let them see me standing." She entered the grand hall draped in silver silk, scars faint but unhidden. Murmurs spread like wildfire. The Omega who defied the king. The mate who nearly died by her own hand. But she held her head high, eyes steady, spine unbroken. And though she didn't glance at him, the Alpha King's chest swelled with something dangerously close to pride. The music swelled, goblets clinked, and then it came fast, a shadow slicing through the crowd, aimed not for her but for him. The Alpha King pivoted, instincts roaring, but before he could move, she was already there. Her body collided with his. The blade sank deep, not into his heart, but hers. The hall erupted into screams. Guards surged forward. The assassin was dragged down. But all the Alpha King saw was her, blood blooming against silver silk, her eyes wide with shock as she collapsed against him. "No." His roar shook the chamber as he caught her, cradling her limp body against his chest. "Not you. Not like this." Her lips parted, a whisper barely audible against the chaos. "I told you. I wouldn't hide. Her breath faltered. And for the first time in his reign, the Alpha King felt true terror, losing the only heart he had ever fought to keep. Just as she begins to soften, an assassin's blade meant for him strikes her instead. Sometimes the heart breaks, not to end love, but to rebuild it stronger. The world returned to her in fragments. A pulse of pain. A whisper of light. A voice, the broken, desperate, calling her name. Her body felt like stone, her chest heavy, her skin burning where the assassin's blade had torn through flesh. She tried to move, but only the flutter of her lashes betrayed the fact that she was still clinging to life. And through the haze, she heard him. "Don't you dare leave me," the Alpha King's voice cracked. Not a command. Not an order. But a plea. His hands, usually weapons of power, trembled where they held her. His forehead pressed to hers, his scent wild with fear, desperation, and something that tasted like regret. For a moment, she wanted to give in. To drift away from the ache, from the weight of betrayal, from the constant war inside her chest. But then she remembered the bond, the betrayal, the lies. And still, the impossible truth, she loved him. Her lips parted, and though the words came faint as a ghost, they cut sharper than any blade. Love without honesty is no love at all. Her voice cracked, and her world spun back into darkness. He hadn't wept since he was a boy, but that night, the Alpha King cried. The palace shook with the sound of his rage when he carried her limp body to the healer's chambers. His generals whispered in corners. His council scattered, terrified. But inside the room where she lay, he wasn't a king. He wasn't a ruler. He was just a man kneeling at the edge of a bed, begging a fragile heart not to give up on him. The healer worked for hours, the air thick with the scent of blood and herbs. "She's alive," the old woman finally rasped, sweat dripping from her brow. But barely. Her wounds go deeper than flesh. The body will heal, the spirit, I cannot promise. The Alpha King's fists clenched. Then I'll give her mine. Whatever it takes. The healer's eyes, ancient and unyielding, met his. You already took too much from her, my king. It isn't your strength she needs, it's your surrender. He sat vigil by her side, refusing the council's summons, ignoring the chaos unraveling beyond the palace walls. Betrayals surfaced, men he trusted revealed their fangs when they sensed weakness. Assassins had not struck by chance, his enemies had seen the cracks forming long before he did. But he let it all burn. Because every hour, every breath, was spent watching her. Sometimes, she stirred. Her eyes opened, glazed with pain, and when they met his, they burned with questions he didn't yet have answers for. Other times, she turned her face away, the rejection sharp as a blade. Still, he stayed. He spoke into the silence. Confessions he'd never let another soul hear. His pride, his mistakes, the fear that ruled him. And finally, what he should have told her the night fate bound them together. I was afraid of you, he whispered one dawn, when the sun painted her face in fragile light. Not because you were weak, but because you made me weak. You held my heart before I even realized it was gone. And I was a coward. I chose power over love. Forgive me, or don't. Just, don't leave me. Her breath was shallow, but her eyes glistened. And for the first time, he saw that forgiveness was not a gift he could command, it was a war they would have to fight together. When she could finally rise from the bed, the palace had changed. Whispers chased her steps. Servants bowed with new reverence, not for the king's chosen mate, but for the woman who had survived blades and betrayal. And him, he followed her, not as a shadow of control, but as a man learning to wait for permission to be near. Their encounters were storms contained in small rooms. In the dining hall, silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken apologies. His hand hovered near hers, but he did not touch. In the gardens, he watched her from a distance, as though afraid his presence might break the fragile peace she was building. And when words came, they were sharp. You can't erase what you did, she spat one evening, her voice trembling as much from hurt as from rage. His jaw tightened. I know. Then why keep chasing forgiveness? Because loving you is the only thing I can't stop. The words silenced her, but not with comfort. Forgiveness was not a door to be opened with pretty phrases, it was a battlefield, and she wasn't ready to surrender. But fate had its own way of forcing choices. The palace walls trembled again, another assassination attempt, but this time she was the target. The blade had been meant for him, but it was her body that bore the strike. And though she lived, the scar it left carved deeper into both of them than any wound before. It was in the aftermath, lying pale and broken, that she saw him, truly saw him. Not the alpha king who ruled with iron and arrogance. Not the man who had betrayed her with silence and pride. But the one who had fallen apart at her bedside, who had ignored his throne, who had chosen her survival over his crown. And in that fragile hour, she realized something that terrified her. She still loved him. Love didn't erase betrayal. Love didn't heal scars overnight. But love, stubborn and unyielding, had survived where everything else had broken. The night she woke fully, he was there, slumped beside her bed, exhaustion etched into his face. She reached out, hesitant, trembling, and placed her scarred hand over his. His head snapped up, disbelief flashing in his eyes. I'm not forgiving you, she whispered, her voice raw but steady. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But I don't want to live without trying. He swallowed hard, his chest rising with a shuddering breath. Then I'll spend every day proving I'm worth that chance. For the first time, she saw him bow, not as a king, but as a man stripped of pride. His lips pressed to her hand, reverent, broken, promising without words. And in that moment, she made her choice. Not as a conquered mate. Not as a woman trapped by a bond she didn't ask for. But as a queen, scarred yet unyielding, who chose to love again. The coronation came weeks later, though it was not his, but hers. She stood at his side, not in chains of duty, but in a crown forged by fire and survival. The court bowed to her, not because she was his omega, but because she had fought for her heart and won. And when he took her hand, the world saw not a king claiming a mate, but a man who had nearly lost everything, now holding it with reverence. Her heart was still scarred. Forgiveness was still a war, fought one day at a time. But she had learned that love wasn't the absence of pain, it was the courage to build something stronger in its wake. Hope was reborn, but the scars remained, a love marked by betrayal, healed by forgiveness, and ruled, at last, by the Omega's heart.